So first of all, you are allowed to praise the arrangements. You don't have to just say negative things. You are allowed to say good things. Remember, if you praise, then the negative goes in so much better, right? So praise and the negative always. What do they say? 5 points of praise for each negative one is always good. So that's good. Okay. So good. So let's go back to the sutta, the Girimananda Sutta, and look at the last perceptions that I talked about there, and then see if we can finish this off this afternoon. Okay. So we have now got up to the fifth of these perceptions. And it goes as follows. And what, Ananda, is the perception of abandoning? This is the Pahana Sanya. Here, a bhikkhu does not tolerate an arisen sensual thought. He abandons it, dispels it, terminates it, and obliterates it. He does not tolerate an arisen thought of ill will, an arisen thought of harming, this vihingsa. Bad, unwholesome qualities, whenever they arise, he abandons them, dispels them, terminates them, and obliterates them. This is called the perception of abandoning. So here we have the usual three unwholesome thoughts, right? The thoughts, sensual thoughts to do with the kama chanda. We have the thoughts of ill will, the vyapada, and then we have the vihingsa vitaka, which is harming, which is like being cold-hearted and ruthless, and not caring about the consequences of your actions on others. So it's slightly different from ill will, but it's not really caring, not having compassion for other people and other beings. And what is sort of interesting about this particular perception is the kind of the vocabulary that is used here for abandoning these things, right? He dispels it, terminates it. Terminates, like Terminator, right? You know the movie Terminator? It's very kind of not exactly gentle and nice. And the last one, obliterate, also a very strong word that is used there. So when you read this kind of vocabulary here, you have to be very careful to interpret these things in the right way here. If you read the Pali also, the vocabulary is very strong as well. Strong words are being used. So what does it mean? It sounds like, on the surface of it, it sounds like you use a massive amount of willpower. You take a big sledgehammer and you kind of sledge these defilements in the head so they cannot come back again for a long time. That is almost what it sounds like. But to be able to appreciate what is really going on here, you have to, again, look at the sutras more broadly to understand what is happening. And if you do that, you realize fairly quickly that what is probably meant here, rather than using willpower, is actually to use your wisdom, use your ability to reflect and contemplate in a wise way. And then these things are abandoned in this way. And this is, I think, one of the important points, is that if you really want to obliterate something, willpower is not going to work. You can't obliterate these thoughts by willpower. Willpower, all you can do is suppress them, hold them away. And as soon as you relax a little bit, they come back again, right? This is the problem with willpower. But if you use the wisdom, your understanding, your powers of reflection, then if you reflect in the right way, if you move from ill will to metta, that ill will is just bang, it evaporates, disappears on the spot, because you're focusing on another aspect of that person, and it just disappears just like that. So remember that what is really the most important thing here, don't be led astray by the kind of words that are used. Be very careful to consider what is actually meant by these things. Again, if you look at the Dveda Vitaka Sutta, they use a similar kind of vocabulary, very strong words. But there, the Buddha is very clear that what he means by that is using wisdom, using reflection, using contemplation. He says, specifically, that when I understood that this thought, and he talks about these kind of thoughts specifically, when I considered that these kind of thoughts lead to my own suffering, right? I abandoned it. When I considered it leads to the suffering of others, I abandoned that thought. When I considered it leads to the suffering of both, I abandoned it. When I consider that it leads to the ending of wisdom, panya nirodhika is the word used in that particular sutta, I abandoned it. When I understood that it leads to problems. Vigata, I think the Pali is problems, basically, something like that. I abandon it. When I understood that it leads away from Nibbana, I abandoned those thoughts. And of course, this understanding, this realization that this is dangerous, it leads to suffering, it destroys wisdom, it destroys the whole path to Nibbana. That is wisdom, right? Nothing to do with willpower, it's got to do with wisdom. And when you do that, that is when you terminate, you obliterate these thoughts, because the power of the wisdom completely overpowers this negative way of thinking here. So that's an important point. And again, please have a look at that Veda Vitakka Sutta for yourself. It's a very nice sutta which talks about how to develop the mind, how to develop the thinking in the right way. And then it goes from that, and eventually it goes all the way to the awakening of the Buddha. The Buddha is talking about his own experiences on the path to awakening here. And very much the same message also comes out in the Vitakka Santana Sutta, which is the Majjhima Nikaya 20. These two suttas come one after the other, and the same message is there. First of all, you abandon the thought by turning away from it, by paying attention to something else. Just like we were talking the other day about resentment, you move your attention to another aspect of the person. That doesn't work. Then you remember the danger in that thing, which is basically the method I just described from the Dveda Vitakka Sutta, the two kind of thoughts. Then the third one is that you just stop thinking about something. You just you don't pay attention to it. That's right. If you get a bad thought, let's say you're doing your meditation practice, a bad thought arises. Instead of paying attention to the bad thought, you just put your attention back on the breath, and you stay with the breath, and you allow that bad thought kind of just to disappear into the background. That's possible to do. If it is just starting to arise, you can do that. If it is already very strong, it's usually too late. And then you have the Vitakka Sankara Santana, I think is the fourth way, I think it's called that. And that seems to be just you just watch that thought, and you don't add any fuel to the fire. You don't kind of keep looking at the positive aspect in something. You see something beautiful, and then you kind of keep on looking at the beauty, and then the desire arises as a consequence. Instead, you stand back and you just watch the thought until it kind of dies down by itself, slowly. So that's kind of a common way that people do it, but it's only the fourth way. And then the fifth way is the one where you use the sledgehammer method, and you kind of, as it says in the sutta, you press the tongue against the roof of the mouth, you clench your fists and your teeth, and you crush mind with mind, as it says in that particular method. But that's the fifth way. Before that, especially the first two ones, they're all about using wisdom and reflection here. So please keep that in mind, because it is very powerful. Of course, it doesn't mean that you don't have to make any effort. It is still effort, because even to be wise, you have to have effort. You have to have mindfulness, right? You have to see things arising, and then you have to bring down the right perception to counteract the other one. All of this takes some degree of effort. So you just have to understand effort in the right way. Once you understand effort in the right way, then you know what you have to do. It is not the kind of sheer willpower. It is a more gentle kind of effort, the wise effort, the mindful effort, the appamada, the heedful effort, if you like. Okay, so that is the perception of abandoning, the pahana sanya. Then we have the next one, and what ananda is the perception of dispassion. This is the viraga sanya. Here, having gone to the forest, to the root of a tree, or to an empty hut, a bhikkhu reflects thus: this is peaceful, this is sublime, that is the stilling of all activities, the relinquishment of all acquisitions, the destruction of craving, dispassion, nibbana. This is called the perception of dispassion. Right, so here again we have that initial phrase, having gone to the forest, to the root of a tree. In other words, here you straight away we see that this is based on profound meditation, based on samadhi. This is the sort of thing that you do when you are secluded and after you have attained samadhi. And then you have this reflection. This is peaceful, this is sublime. Etang santang, etang panitang. This is kind of the usual Buddha. The Buddha tends to understate things, right? When he says this is peaceful, it means this is the highest peace. This is the most sublime. That's essentially what he's saying here. So the idea here, you can see that this is a reflection on Nibbana itself. It ends up with Nibbana. So the idea here is to try to understand, move your mind towards understanding that Nibbana actually is peaceful. It actually is sublime. For many people, if you hear about Nibbana, people say, oh, it's the ending of all defilements, it's the kind of ending of existence. Sometimes it doesn't do anything for you. You don't feel inspired by that. You feel, okay, so what, right? Because it's hard to grasp what that actually means. What does it mean to end craving? What does it mean to end defilements? What does it mean to end the round of rebirth? Often it doesn't grab the heart. It doesn't feel like it's worthwhile. So to be able to make it clear that these things are worthwhile, it is important to reflect on these things. And as you reflect on these things, as you build up the perception that Nibbana is something sublime, something peaceful, something wonderful, of course, gradually, your mind starts to move in that direction. Right? And eventually it means that you are able to use that reflection to actually abandon all existence itself. You move it towards this, and then the whole samsaric cycle can be abandoned on that basis. So that's the idea here. How can we see Nibbana as something positive? Right? This is kind of the idea. So first of all, it is useful to remember that Nibbana in the suttas is often it is two different things. It's the sa-upadisesa nibbana and the anupadisesa nibbana. And the anupadisesa is what happens when the arahant passes away, right? There's no fuel left, no khandhas left, everything is disappeared. But the normal meaning of nibbana in the suttas is the sa-upadisesa nibbana, the nibbana where there is some fuel left. The fuel is the five aggregates. It's the fuel for clinging, right? So the fuel is still remaining to some extent. And this is the normal meaning of Nibbana in the suttas. So when we read this and when you understand the term Nibbana, that is what it refers to. It refers to the state of being an arahant. What does it mean to be an arahant? This is basically what it refers to. So just to get that clarified straight away. So what does it mean to be an arahant? It is peaceful, it is sublime, the stilling of all activities, sabbe sankhara samatha, right? You may have heard this phrase, sabbe sankhara samatha. All sankharas are stilled. Sankharas, in this context, the most important meaning in this context is probably the willed activities of the mind again. So all the willing, especially the willing that leads to karma formation, has been stilled. So this is basically the ending, the stilling of the second factor of dependent arising. The second factor of dependent arising has come to an end, has nirodha, has ceased. Right? Cessation of avidya, cessation of sankhara, the stilling of all those things. And so you learn, right? And this you can learn in part through your meditation practice. How nice it is when these sankharas, all these activities are calming down and are becoming less and less. You're actually creating less karma in that way as they are calming down. And just to see that and to understand that is very useful. The relinquishment of all acquisition, sambupadhi patinisaga, right? So, Upadi in Pali means anything that you own, anything that you take up for grasping, for holding on to. So it means any external possessions you have, but it also means, in the Buddhist practice, it means the five khandhas themselves, because we take these up for ownership, right? My body, my feelings, we say these kind of things all the time. So this is also part of what the ownership is about, ownership of what is closest to us, the five khandhas. So the idea here is that everything you think you own, absolutely everything, is let go of. And then you have to understand why that is happiness. And again, it's difficult because it's so counter to the way that the world normally thinks about things. The world always thinks that having more is good, but here having less is more, having less is better. So you consider that. What, isn't it nice to have few things? Isn't it a kind of an undoing of a burden? Isn't there a sense of freedom in having very little? And the less you have, the less of a burden there is. And again, you can see that in your meditation practice. As you become more calm, more peaceful, in a sense you have less in a very real way. And because you have less, you feel the sense of ease that comes through meditation practice. Sense of joy, happiness, all that comes from this abandoning of all these upadis that just burdens you down at the end. So you abandon all the upadis, you relinquish everything, and you live a life without anything at all, including the five khandhas themselves. The destruction or the ending of craving, tanhakaya, destruction, I don't think is a very good English translation, at the ending of craving, stopping of craving. So again, you consider that, and instead of thinking of craving as it's my right, I want to crave, I want to get all these things, I am craving, I identify as the doer and the craver. Instead of thinking like that, you understand that actually it is a problem, it is not nice, and to abandon it is much better. Dispassion, very similar to destruction or ending of craving, right? Dispassion, the opposite of passion, the opposite of desire, the opposite of wanting things, etc. Very, very similar kind of meaning here. Nibbana, extinguishment. As I think I said before, I think we should translate that word so it makes clear what it actually means. And when you, instead of saying Nibbana, it means you can put any kind of meaning into that word when you just leave it as Nibbana. But once you translate it, then it's more difficult to put any kind of meaning into it. Extinguishment is the right one. And then, of course, it means extinguishment. It means the extinguishing of the defilements. So you contemplate that. What does it mean to extinguish the defilements? And then again, you consider the mind that is defiled. You compare it with a mind which is relatively undefiled. And you start to see how nice it is to have this pure mind because of the clarity it gives, the sense of ease it gives, the sense of not being the slave to craving or the slave to restlessness, but actually being able just to relax and enjoy life in a very different way. These things are distortions that destroy everything, clarity, wisdom, understanding, happiness. That's what they destroy here. And once you start to see that, you are moving towards this extinguishment, sometimes translated as extinction, but I think maybe that's a bit too negative, but extinguishment at the very least. So this is what this is about, to understand why Nibbana is happiness. And then you start to incline in that direction, and your mind actually moves in a different way here. This is called the perception of dispassion here. Okay. And what Ananda is the perception of cessation here? Here, having gone to the forest, to the root of a tree, or to an empty hut, a bhikkhu reflects thus: this is peaceful, this is sublime, that is the stilling of all activities, the relinquishment of all acquisitions, the ending of craving, cessation, nibbana. This is called the perception of cessation. So this is exactly the same as the other one, except now we have cessation rather than dispassion. So here, cessation in this context means the cessation of tanha, of craving. That is the main meaning in this context. So just the ending of craving, right? That I think is the main meaning here. So anyway, I don't think we have to go through that one again. So we'll just leave that one to one side, and we'll move on to the next ones. And what Ananda is the perception of non-delight in the entire world. Here a bhikkhu refrains from any engagement and clinging, mental standpoints, adherences and underlying tendencies in regard to the world, abandoning them without clinging to them. This is called the perception of non-delight in the entire world. Sabba loka anabhiratta sanya. So the idea here is just that you don't cling. You don't cling to anything in the world, right? The whole world Remember that when we talk about the world in Buddhism, we talk about anything that is possible to experience, right? So anything you can experience through your meditation, anything you can experience through rebirth, the whole kind of spectre of happiness and suffering is what is meant, from the highest happiness to the lowest suffering. This is really the idea of world here. The entire kind of possibility of experience is included. And then you don't cling to that. All of these words here that I mentioned in the Pali, engagement, upaya, clinging here is upadana, mental standpoints, I think is aditana. Aditana is more like focusing on or being interested in or something like that. Adherences is, what is the word? Adherences is anyway, it's one of these Pali words. Abhinivesa, I think, yeah. And underlying tendencies, yeah, okay. Anusayas, thank you, that's exactly right, anusayas, yeah. So you don't have any of that, no holding on, no standing, not focusing on, no adherences to anything in the world, because you understand that it is problematic. You understand that it's just part of this samsaric transmigration, going around. And even when you find that great happiness in the jhana states, you know that even that is temporary. And when you know this underlying anicca of everything, the unreliability, how you can't really stand anywhere, there's nothing to hold on to, then you feel this dispassion towards all of this. You don't care about it anymore. And all the clinging, all the grasping, all the adherences just evaporate as a consequence. And this is what this perception is about. So some of these things are very profound, obviously, and so they are kind of come towards the end of the path, but these are things that we can use, at least to some extent, even at earlier stages. And what ananda is the perception of impermanence in all conditioned phenomena. Here a bhikkhu is repelled, humiliated, and disgusted by all conditioned phenomena. This is called the perception of impermanence in all conditioned phenomena. So all conditioned phenomena is here sabbe sankhara. So sabbe sankhara anicca sanya is what this is. So very similar to what we saw before when we saw just the anicca sanya. It's basically the same thing. Is seeing the impermanence in the five khandhas and seeing the impermanence in all sankharas is the same, basically the same thing. So remember that sankhara in this kind of context does not mean the will, it means all conditioned phenomena. So here it means like everything here. Now this is a very unusual way that this is described here. Usually seeing the impermanence actually means contemplating the impermanence, like we were talking about before. But here the definition is more the result of that contemplation. So when you do contemplate impermanence in a very profound way, this is the result of that. The result is that you are repelled, you are humiliated, you are disgusted, very strong words, by all conditioned phenomena. Right? This is the result of seeing things as impermanent. And the idea here, as I was saying before, is just like when you put your hand on a hot plate, right? And the hot plate, you don't know it's hot, you do it by accident, and you automatically withdraw your hand because there is an automatic reaction that draws that back again. In exactly the same way, when the insight matures and you see things very clearly, you see this is suffering, this is dukkha, this is, you see that, and of course when you see dukkha in that way, that everything is dukkha, your mind withdraws from that. It is repelled by that. There's an automatic reaction, just like the withdrawing of the hand. So this is kind of the idea of nibbida. Nibbida comes from seeing the dukkha, the yatha buddha jnana dassana, seeing things in accordance to reality, which is part of that is seeing dukkha, and then the withdrawal happens all by itself. You're literally repelled. You can't bear it anymore, right? Wow, it's just so suffering here. And this is just so different from how we normally see the world. It's almost hard to understand how these things actually, how this actually is possible. But of course the point is that you're then moving your attention to something more powerful, which is the ending of all those things. Including all the little insects. The ending of all... Okay. So that is the... that one there, and I I think that particular perception is the only place in the suttas it is defined in this way. So it is rather unusual. And for that reason, when you read, I'm not sure about the Sinhala edition of the Pali Canon, but the different editions of the Pali Canon, they have different readings here. Some have anicca, sabbe sankhara anicca sanya. Some have sabbe sankhara anicca, anicca as in non-desire, anicca. One is anicca, the other one is anicca. Anicca is non-desire, other one is impermanence. Two different readings. So that's why there is confusion, because this is a very unusual kind of definition here. So you see, even the Pali Canon sometimes gets confused. One canon says this, another one says something else, and you wonder which one is true. I think the true one is anicca, impermanence, because that is found elsewhere, whereas non-desire isn't found anywhere else in the entire Pali Canons. I think that must be a mistake. That's my personal opinion about that. Now we're getting into the really nitty-gritty of Pali and things. So let us now come to what is one of the most important ones. I have left this one for last. Maybe we should have gone through this first, but it's not really necessary because we have been talking about mindfulness of breathing throughout. But here is the Buddha's advice on mindfulness of breathing. And this is the standard advice you see throughout the suttas. This is what you see in the Anapanasati Sutta and you see everywhere else. And here it even is included in these groups of perceptions. It is quite strange that the breath is called a perception in this way. Of course, the breath is a perception, that is true, but it's not normally considered to be a perception that you develop in the same way as other perceptions. Right? So it is kind of slightly strange that it is here. And I'm not sure why that is, but be that as it may, let's just have a look what it actually says, because of course this is some of the core meditation instructions found in the suttas. And what, Ananda, is mindfulness of breathing? Here, a bhikkhu, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and established mindfulness in front of him. Just mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. So that is the beginning of the mindfulness of breathing. And I think that the most important instructions in many ways in this sutta is precisely that very first part there. Because if you get that right, then the mindfulness of breathing tends to be a very automatic process that happens pretty much. Nothing much you have to do except just be aware of the breath and just sit back and relax. So get this part right, and then things start to happen. And of course, what you will notice here is again this first part here, having gone to the forest, right, to the foot of a tree, and you sit down. So now we're talking about serious meditation practice that is supposed to lead all the way up to samadhi, and that's why you do it in seclusion. This is kind of the part of the important point here. It's solitary meditation practice. And it says too that you sit down. Mindfulness of breathing happens in the sitting position, essentially, is what it says here. So then it has having folded the legs crosswise. And many people would say that because it says that here, you have to sit cross-legged to do anapanasati. Personally, I don't interpret it like that. My personal interpretation is that that is the way it was done at that time. That's actually how you sat. Most people would have sat on the floor at that time. They did have chairs, but I think they very often sat on the floor as well. So that would have been the natural posture, right? That's how you sat. You had your legs cross-legged. The alternative might have to spread your legs out in front of you, but that wouldn't really be possible if you're going to meditate. So I don't think this is an absolute necessity. I know people who sit on chairs and who get very good meditation from that. What really matters is your ability to be steady. You sit in a comfortable posture, which is steady and sturdy, so that you are able to forget about the body and just get on with the breath. That is what really matters here. So find a nice steady position, regardless of what it is, pretty much. You can also lie down and do mindfulness of breathing. That's also possible. If your mindfulness is very clear. I know monks who do that. I was telling you the other day about Ajahn Ganha, who I met in Thailand recently. And when he came to Bodhinyana Monastery many years ago, he was asked how he meditates. And he said, I just lie down. I lie down, and then when I lie down, it's so nice because when you lie down, you can really relax, and when you can really relax, it is much easier to let go of the body. So he does lying down meditation, and then people ask him, well, when you lie down, don't you fall asleep? And he says, no, I don't do anything when I lie down, and if I fell asleep, that would be doing something. So for him, falling asleep is doing something, right? He just has this pure awareness, pure mindfulness, lying down, doesn't do anything, he doesn't switch off, nothing like that. And his meditation takes off from that point of view, that point onwards. So this is something you can try, right? Sometimes you can try to lie down if you feel that your body is hurting and aching, nothing else works. You can actually also try to lie down. Lie down in a slightly different posture from when you go to sleep, so that you don't have the perception of sleeping, right? Whatever, maybe lying on your back or whatever. And then you can try to meditate on that basis. It may not work, and if it doesn't work, that's fine, but at least this seems to be some people for whom that actually works well. Okay, straightens the body, right? So again, it's about straightening the body at the right time. When you straighten the body, then you get a bit of clarity in the mind because your body is straight, but do it at the right time. Don't push yourself too much. Very often when you meditate, the straightening of the body almost happens by itself as soon as mindfulness arises. It's just quite natural to sit straight. Nothing you have to worry about too much. And established mindfulness in front of him. One of the many questions I was getting during the interview time is people saying, oh, I watch my breath here, right, and on my upper lip or the nostrils. And the reason why this is the normal way that is done, if you go to the Mahasi technique, they say you should watch the breath here. And the reason they say that is because that's the commentarial understanding of this word. The word is parimukkhang, and it's one of those words that is very difficult to know exactly what it means. But there are many interesting studies of this word, and some of these studies, they have concluded that it doesn't mean the upper lip necessarily, but it can just mean having mindfulness in the present moment, in the here and now, in front of you. In other words, means at this time and in this space, right here, right now, just in your general surroundings, so to speak. And I know that certainly Ajahn Brahm, he always recommends people not necessarily to focus on the lip, because it can become too tight, too kind of narrowed down, because if you do that, your focus is very small and very so you have to sometimes use force, use a bit of willpower to enable you to focus on such a narrow area. And it's easy perhaps later on as your focus becomes clearer, as your samadhi deepens, but especially at the beginning of the meditation, it's important to relax first of all. So just have a very general awareness of the breath, just awareness of whether it is going in and out, and not any particular location on the body. But again, it doesn't matter what you do. You can do whatever works is really the final say in these things. So if it works for you, then it's fine. It doesn't matter here. So you establish mindfulness, right? And this was one of those things that, one of the things that is often difficult in meditation practice, but you have to allow that mindfulness to arise. So you take your time, and it should be an easy mindfulness, a relaxed mindfulness, not one that is driven by willpower. It is possible to be mindful through willpower, but this should be one where you sit back, and it's just completely natural and completely easy. And to do that, that's why I go through all the stages of relaxing, finding the ease in the body, finding the ease in the mind, so that it actually happens all by itself. So this is every time you sit down, I recommend you to go through that. Sometimes you can go through it incredibly fast. If you are on a very solitary retreat, you may be able to skip it altogether even. But it's a good thing to do to make sure that you are ready. And so that is the first way of giving rise to mindfulness. But the problem is that even that only works if you have done all the preparatory work on the Eightfold Path. So you have to make sure that your sila is really good. You have to make sure that you have used the sammapadana, the right effort to abandon the unwholesome thoughts and bring up the good thoughts. All that preparatory work has to be in place. And only when that is in place is there a good chance that you will be able to give rise to mindfulness. If the preparatory work is weak, you may occasionally be able to watch the breath because things are right, but generally speaking, it will be much more difficult if that isn't solid enough. So the better your sila is, the better your general mind states are, your whole conduct is, the more ability you will have to be able to be mindful in the present moment. Why is that? Because if you are a really good person, if you have a really good heart, it's easy because you like yourself, you feel good about yourself. If you feel good about yourself, it's natural. The present moment is also nice. But if your conduct isn't 100%, you feel a bit unhappy about your own conduct, of course, the present moment is not going to be as nice. So the connection between mindfulness and virtue and sila and character is very, very close. And once you understand that connection, it becomes very clear that every time, every thought, every action you do is important because it will determine the outcome of your meditation practice. It gives you a sense of urgency, right? Got to do what is right in this moment. So that is the establishing of mindfulness. And once that is established, then it says here, just mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. Right? Just mindful. Satova in the Pali. And this little word just there, I think, may be, sometimes it may be over-reading the suttas perhaps, but I think it may have some importance. And the idea is that you don't do anything. All you are is mindful. There is no willpower, there is no force, there is no chaitana required. All that is required is mindfulness, sati. That's all that is required. All you have to do is sit back and watch. No will or anything like that. Leave all that aside. And then, once you do that, once you have established this mindfulness, then the actual practice of anapanasati starts. Right, and then we have all these steps. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly now because we have already looked at these in some detail all along. So let's just have a quick look at this. So first of all, breathing in long, he knows I breathe in long, and breathing out long, he knows I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he knows I breathe in short, or breathing out short, he knows I breathe out short. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. He trains thus, tranquilizing the bodily activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus, tranquilizing the bodily activity, I will breathe out. So that is the first 4 aspects of anapanasati, and then we have 12 more coming up, so there's 16 altogether. And these first 4 ones, they are equivalent to the kaya nupassana of the Satipatthana Sutta. This is the equivalent to the contemplation of the body here. And so here, first of all you have to do is to know that you are breathing in long, breathing in short. And the idea behind this is simply that you are aware of the breath. Why does it say long and then say short? Not 100% clear, but sometimes people's experience in meditation is that when you start out, the breath is long and the breath gets shorter as you become more peaceful. So that's one possible understanding of this. Another one is simply that one aspect of the breath that is prominent when you are aware of it is the length of the breath. So that just means that you are aware of the breath, right? You know it's long, you know it's short. It just means that you have awareness of it. So you know these things. This is how it starts out. And then it says the next one, you train experiencing the whole body. So the first one it says knows, now it says trains. Is that significant? Perhaps it is significant, and the reason might simply be that the awareness of the long and short breath is automatic once you have established mindfulness, but to experience the whole body of the breath, the entire breath, actually takes time for that to arise. You have to wait, you have to sit back, you have to apply that mindfulness for some time, and this is what is meant by training here. Training here, I don't think it means applying yourself in any particular way, apart from having that awareness. That's really all that is required. So it takes a bit of time. That's why it's called trains. Experiencing the whole body. We discussed this yesterday in the Q&A, And I understand this to mean that you experience the whole breath, right? The entire breath from beginning to end. And you get more of an overview of what is going on. Your mindfulness is sharpening up, becoming more powerful, and you're able to see all the details of what is going on. That would be my understanding of this. Again, other people understand this differently, but that is the most sensible understanding as far as I can see. And then, once that is happening, then tranquilizing the bodily activity. Bodily activity is another word for breath, so this means the tranquilizing of the breath. And again, it doesn't mean that you do this through willpower or a matter of choice or a matter of decision or anything like that. All it means is that you keep on watching, you keep on being aware, and this is the automatic process. If the preliminary work, the sila, and all of that has been really properly established, then this is an automatic process that happens all by itself. Long, short breath, seeing the whole breath, calming down of the breath. It's this nice, beautiful process, and you will see how, you all know how delightful that is when it kind of works in that direction. So that is the Kaya Nupassana. Then we have the second aspect, the second four factors of Anapanasati. He trains thus, experiencing rapture, piti, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing rapture, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing happiness, sukha, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing happiness, I will breathe out. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trains thus, tranquilizing the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains thus, tranquilizing the mental activity, I will breathe out. So here we can see when the breath becomes very refined, tranquilizing the breath in the previous one. You know, sometimes your breath disappears. Many people talk about the breath disappearing, and that is probably what happens around this stage. Your mindfulness isn't able to quite keep up with the tranquility of the breath. But if you keep on going and you keep on doing this and you keep on doing this practice, then eventually you will start to experience rapture. The piti will start to arise because it is so beautiful when everything becomes tranquil and nice and peaceful. That rapture, piti, arises as a consequence. We have talked about the rapture before on the very first day, how the rapture comes from the pamoja, which comes from the sila. So again, it's an automatic consequence of the sila that you are practicing here. So you're experiencing rapture, and then you keep on watching the breath, right? This is like a dual experience. You're both seeing the breath and experiencing rapture at the same time. So you keep on watching the breath, and as you do that, you start to experience a different kind of happiness, a more subtle type of happiness, and that is the sukha, which is talked about here. So you experience sukha. So there's a mixture of the two a little bit, but essentially these are just varying degrees of happiness that you experience. Then it says experiencing the mental activity, and the mental activity in the suttas is usually sanya and vedana, right? This is what is happening, what is going on in the mind. So the chitta sankhara. And part of that could also be the volition of the mind, in other words, the will of the mind, because at this point there's still some movement going on. The breath is still there, the mind may be moving a little bit back and forth. So because there is this volition there, the picture you're having is not entirely stable. There's a movement. So you want to calm everything down, right? So first of all, you experience that those mental phenomena, and then the last stage is then the calming down of that mental volition, tranquilizing the mental activity here. You are tranquilizing the perception and feelings, which also means you're tranquilizing the chaitana, the will, which is driving and still creating some movement in the mind right there. Right, so now things are becoming very, very nice at this point. Wow, I mean, if you get to these kind of points, this is when you start to feel so much happiness, so much joy coming out of your meditation practice. Already at this point, it is becoming incredibly worthwhile. You're starting to see the world in a new light. You're starting to emerge from the karma loka, right? Coming out of this karma loka, so bothersome, so problematic, so much conflict and problems happening in this world. And you're merging gradually into the world of the mind, leaving karma loka behind, slightly emerging into the, slowly into the rupa loka. So you're kind of in this transition state between two different worlds, moving from one, moving to the other one. At this stage, you could say you are in the higher echelons of the karma loka, right? Moving up through the various heavens, as it were, through your mental experience. That's essentially what is happening here. You get some idea what it is like to be reborn, right? In the high heavenly realms. This is kind of part of this. Okay, so you tranquilize all the mental activity. The mind is becoming even more peaceful, and then we can move on to I should say that this is also equivalent to the Vedananupasana, because this has all to do with feelings, the experience of feelings, together with the breath. Then we have the next one. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, stilling the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, stilling the mind, I will breathe out. He trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains thus, liberating the mind, I will breathe out. So here we are now moving away from the body, right? Tranquilizing all the mental activity, and you're moving on to an experience which is much more mental. The physical world is starting to disappear. The body is starting to disappear. The senses are starting to disappear. They haven't gone completely yet. You are still able to access them if you want to. Sometimes you will have some sensory input, but there won't be that much. And I think this particular transition you see here is very often the same transition that you have when you move from the breath and you're moving more onto the the samadhi nimitta. Somebody asked me whether it has to be kind of a light in the mind, and this is one of those controversial things. I think it is a very common experience that you have a light in the mind, but it may or may not be absolutely necessary here. The sutras don't talk very much about it. They talk more about the feelings that are involved with these things rather than what you actually see. So they tend to generalize much more here. So, but I think this is probably what occurs for many people at this point. Experience in the mind means seeing a samadhi nimitta in the mind's eye, seeing something, this powerful light coming up, right? At the beginning, perhaps not so powerful, but after a while, becoming more powerful. So, and that is why it says here, you experiencing the mind, and then you gladden the mind. The idea here is that you make the samadhi nimitta more powerful. You stay with it. You observe it. You have a very peaceful attention on it. You don't move the mind. You just see the beauty in the samadhi nimitta. You focus on it. And as you do that, it becomes more happy all by itself. Again, no will, no volition, no doing, no choice is required on your part. This is an automatic process. If your sila is strong enough, the foundational aspects of the path are powerful enough, then this process is automatic. So you gladden this thing. The whole process becomes more happy. And then you still the mind as well. There is perhaps still some movement there in your perception, something going on. So by keeping your attention on the samadhi nimitta, it stills down, become even more quiet. And this seems to be like a fairly common and almost perhaps universal thing that happens with the samadhi nimitta when you get to that stage, is that it becomes more still and more happy, more glad and more stilled as you keep focusing on this object. And of course, then the final one, the very last one, is the liberating the mind. And this is the very last thing over which you have some degree of control at all. And liberating the mind means liberating it from all those things that are you want to move away from the body, from the five senses, from the five hindrances. All of that you are liberated from. And at that point, you enter the jhana states. So this is the vimochayang chittang, right? The very last thing you do. moving the mind out of the kama loka and moving it completely into the rupa loka at this stage. The body, the senses have gone completely. You don't even have access to them anymore at this stage. And that ends the anapanasati. Beyond that, there's nothing you can do. You have kind of reached the end of this whole process. So, at that stage, of course, wow, things are really are very, very, very interesting and very powerful. And you kind of you see the world in a completely different way. You have climbed the mountain. You can look down on the rest of the world. You can understand the karma dhatu, the karma loka, and understand what it is all about and why it is so problematic. And because you have this ability to stand on the mountain and look down, this is why the final four factors of the Anapanasati Sutta are all about insight and understanding here. Because at this point you have, as I said this morning, all the data is in, and now you can use that data for insight. So after you come out of your samadhi, you think or you train. He trains thus, contemplating impermanence. I will breathe in. He trains thus, contemplating impermanence. I will breathe out. He trains thus, contemplating fading away. Viraga, I will breathe in. He trains thus, contemplating fading away. I will breathe out. He trains thus, contemplating cessation. I will breathe in. He trains thus, contemplating cessation. I will breathe out. He trains thus, contemplating relinquishment. I will breathe in. He trains thus, contemplating relinquishment. I will breathe out. This is called mindfulness of breathing here. So here, you contemplate the impermanence. What exactly is it that you contemplate? And again, as I said before, earlier on today, it seems to me that what you contemplate, the most natural thing to contemplate, is the very process that you have been going through. You have been practicing samadhi, you have seen how things change, how they fade away, how they eventually cease, right? You have seen that process directly with your eyes, and with your inner eye, that is. And now you contemplate that, you think back on that, and then that gives rise to even more profound insight. It gives rise to the sense of nibbida, the aversion to all that. You understand that it's dukkha, it's impermanent, it's non-self, it's unreliable, and you start to be able to let go of these things. So when you contemplate all of these things in this way, then because you understand how unreliable it is, how suffering it is, non-self it is, it all ends up in relinquishment. The relinquishment is the last one, patinissaga, and this means that you abandon craving for this. No more desire for these things. Craving itself dies down, and then you have relinquished it completely here. So that is the powerful, the wonderful Anapanasati Sutta. This is not actually the sutta, but it's exactly the same as we find in that sutta. So contemplate that, use this as a guide if you like when you do Anapanasati, because this is obviously the Buddha's way of looking at these things, and for that reason it is the guide of all guides for understanding this particular practice. Okay, so there we are, mindfulness of breathing. And then the Buddha says at the very end here, if Ananda, you visit the bhikkhu Girimananda and speak to him about these 10 perceptions, it is possible that on hearing about them, he will immediately recover from his affliction. Then, when the Venerable Ananda had learned these 10 perceptions from the Blessed One, he went to the Venerable Girimananda and spoke to him about them. When the Venerable Girimananda heard about these 10 perceptions, his affliction immediately subsided. The Venerable Girimananda recovered from that affliction, and that is how he was cured of his affliction. So there you are. So if somebody is sick, you can recite the Girimananda Sutta to them, and see what happens. See if they immediately recover or not. How is it possible that somebody can immediately recover? I think one of the obvious reasons why they can do that is because they really understand what is going on. So I think it works if you are an Aryan and you understand what these things are about. It will have much more power. If you are an ordinary person and people recite the Girimananda Sutta to you in Pali, for example, you have no idea what's going on, no clue what it's all about, then I think the effect is going to be much less. It is still nice. It's always nice if somebody chants for you, so there will be like the placebo effect and that sort of thing will still be there, but obviously it won't have the same power. I think it is the understanding of this, the kind of the raising of the spirit, the raising of the mind must be part of what is actually happening here. Okay, so that is the Giri Mananda Sutta for you. And now we are coming to the very last sutta of this retreat. So this is the ending sutta. And it is one of those suttas which I really enjoy for different reasons. But you will see what this sutta is about in a second. It's all about stirring the bhikkhus, stirring perhaps the lay people to get going with the practice, right? This is what this is about. And it also brings in dependent arising at the same time. And because that has kind of been a bit of a theme on this retreat, it kind of ties everything together a little bit. So this is called the 10 powers, Dasa Bala, at Savati. Bhikkhus possessing the 10 powers and the 4 grounds of self-confidence, the Tathagata claims the place of the chief bull of the herd, roars his lion's roars in the assemblies, and sets rolling the Brahma wheel. Thus, so he claims the place of the chief bull, right? He's the leader. He roars his lion's roar in the assemblies. And the lion's roar, as you will see in a second, is just the Dhamma itself. And it is a lion's roar. It is kind of it is something which stirs people up, which wakes them up when they hear this. It is said that even the devas, when the devas in the heavens, when they hear the Buddha's teaching, they kind of become worried and concerned because they think, wow, we are impermanent. We thought we were permanent, but actually there is a problem here. So just like all the creatures in the world, all the animals, they shiver and quake when they hear the lion. So devas and humans, they become worried and concerned when they hear the Buddha's lion's roar, and they understand something needs to be done. He sets rolling the Brahma wheel, Brahma here in the sense of the best wheel, the highest wheel, the wheel that sets rolling in the world and carries on from one generation to the next one. That's why it is the wheel, and still rolling out in the world today after 2,500 years. And this is how the Buddha does that. Such is form, such its origin, such its passing away. Such is feeling, such its origin, such its passing away. Such is perception, such its origin, such its passing away. Such are the willed activities, such their origin, such their passing away. Such is consciousness, such its origin, such its passing away. Thus, when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. And with the cessation of this, that ceases. That is with delusion, with avidya as condition. There are willed activities. With willed activities as condition, there is consciousness. All the way down, dependent origination. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. But with the remainderless fading away and cessation of avidya, comes the cessation of the willed activities. With the cessation of the willed activities, there is the cessation of consciousness. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. So here you can see that dependent arising is applied to the 5 khandhas, the 5 aggregates, or the 5 groups, or whatever you want to call these things. It's kind of difficult to find a good translation in English. So these 5 khandhas, so you see when it says such is form, it means you understand what rupa is all about. And essentially, of course, it means that you understand that it is suffering. Right? This is the essential, the most important aspect of rupa, because once you understand that it is suffering, you want to abandon it, you want to give it up. Such its origin, and this here the origin is explained in terms of dependent origination. It originates through this dependent origination chain. Rupa exists because of avidya, because of ignorance. And then that ignorance leads to the arising of this whole mass of suffering. And one aspect of that whole mass of suffering is rupa itself, right? That is what arises through this. And then the passing away is here the negative aspect of dependent origination, right? With the cessation of avidya, everything ceases until you have the remainderless cessation of the whole mass of suffering. That is what is meant by here the passing away of form. So be very careful. There's one, a standard understanding in the suttas when you see the arising and passing away of phenomena, the arising and passing away of form. People think it means in the present moment, right? Or you see the rising of form, you're watching form passing away, arising, passing away. Sometimes even worse, called the rise and fall, which is even worse in my opinion, because it leaves the idea of perhaps an underlying substance, just things rising and falling like the ocean rising and falling here. But it's not, you see here, it's not nothing to do here with the arising and falling in the present moment. This is not some kind of mental state, one after the other. What it means is the arising upon a new life, the arising every time you get reborn, and then the final passing away when you reach the parinibbana at the end and everything ceases. That is what is meant here by origin and passing away of the five khandhas. So sometimes one needs to be very careful. One needs to take the overall message of the suttas to see what is going on here. So this is the most profound experience of arising and passing away that is talked about. And that is often the purpose. When we talk about contemplating the five khandhas, we're talking about the final contemplation of the five khandhas. When you give up everything and you attain the final cessation of all of these things, which includes the final cessation of suffering, of course. And this is the same thing for all of these five khandhas, right? You understand such is feeling. You understand the suffering nature of feeling. Even the happy feelings have the suffering nature because they are unreliable and impermanent, and because the happiness is only relative compared to the higher happinesses. And again, the origin and passing away is the origin through the dependent arising, and the passing away is the passing away through this cessation, through dependent cessation itself. Perceptions understand the suffering, understand how it arises and passes away through dependent arising and dependent cessation. The same with the willed activities, and finally, the same thing also for consciousness itself. So this is like the summary, right, of the Buddha's teaching, set out in its most profound form, the five aggregates together with dependent arising, and how the five aggregates is basically what the whole mass of suffering is all about. Because the Dhamma has thus been well expounded by me, elucidated, disclosed, revealed, stripped of patchwork. When, because the Dhamma has thus been well expounded by me, elucidated, disclosed, revealed, stripped of patchwork, this is enough for a clansman who has gone forth out of faith to arouse his energy thus. Willingly let only my skin, sinews, and bones remain. Let the flesh and blood dry up in my body. But I will not relax my energy so long as I have not attained what can be attained by manly strength, by manly energy, by manly exertion. Right? The Dhamma is stripped of patchwork. It is an integrated whole. There is no problem. It is elucidated and disclosed. He doesn't hold anything back. You see the profundity. You see it's only the core teachings that are there. Nothing irrelevant, no philosophy, no nonsense is included in the Dhamma. It is a very deliberate exposition of the truth that he has discovered himself, the Buddha has discovered himself. And because of that, you know that what you're receiving is something profound, something meaningful, and you understand that you are willing to give everything to achieve this, right? It is worthwhile giving up your life, quite literally, to achieve this kind of understanding, because it is about the meaning of life itself. Nothing else in the world is even remotely can compare to this kind of the achievement of the understanding of the Buddha's teachings. And that is why it is worthwhile, even if your blood and flesh dry up, right? Still it is worthwhile, even if that happens. This doesn't mean that we should literally allow the blood and flesh to dry up, because there is no need for that. We have the requisites to support us. It just means that if it is necessary, we are willing to go that far, because that is how important this is. It is about, there's nothing else that really matters apart from this. Because a lazy person dwells in suffering, soiled by bad, unwholesome qualities, and great is the personal good that he neglects. But the energetic person dwells happily, secluded from the bad, unwholesome qualities, and great is the personal good that he achieves. It is not by the inferior that the supreme is attained, rather it is by the supreme that the supreme is attained. Because this holy life is a beverage of cream, the teacher is present. Therefore, bhikkhus, arouse your energy for the attainment of the as yet unattained, for the achievement of the as yet unachieved, for the realization of the as yet unachieved, with the thought, in such a way, this going forth of ours will not be barren, but fruitful and fertile. And when we use the robes, alms food, lodgings, and medicinal requisites offered to us by others, these services they provide for us will be of great fruit and benefit to them. Thus, bhikkhus, you should train yourselves. Right? If you don't have the energy, then you are the personal good that you are neglecting is enormous. The personal good comes out and is achieved by the energetic person who dwells secluded from the wholesome states. It is not by the inferior that the superior is attained. It is by the superior or by the supreme. In other words, you have to apply yourself in the right way, in the best way, using the 5 spiritual faculties, etc., to the highest degree, and then there is a chance that you will succeed. The holy life is a beverage of cream. Cream is always the best, right? It's the supreme of things, the highest of things, the cream of something being the highest. The teacher is present, and the teacher is still present because we have the suttas, so the teacher is still here. And because of that, you arouse the energy for achieving what should be achieved, etc. And you have this beautiful, and you realize it's not just for yourself that you do this, but the Buddha says here, you do it, because then that will also be to give the great fruit and benefit to all those people who provide us with our requisites, right? Sense of compassion for all the support we get from all the people in the world. And what a wonderful thought that is. Sometimes we need that extra incentive. Sometimes, okay, we're doing it, of course, for ourselves. But when you think of it, you're also doing it out of compassion for all the people who are supporting you. And in the end, out of compassion for the whole world, you have this extra incentive to practice really well. And this is what the Buddha is saying here. And then he ends off, finally, the very last paragraph. Considering your own good, bhikkhus, it is enough to strive for the goal with diligence or heedfulness. Considering the good of others, it is enough to strive for the goal with heedfulness. Considering the good of both, it is enough to strive for the goal with heedfulness. There you are. So the Buddha is saying, go for it, don't mess around, practice. This good for everybody comes out of this. No problems, no suffering, only good comes out of practicing this beautiful path that only leads to happiness, only leads to the end of problems and suffering for everyone, ourselves included. So, there you are. That's what the Buddha has to say, encouraging us on. So, that is the final sutta for this retreat. And so, I'll see you again this evening. We can do also the final Q&A and then see what comes out of that. Until then, keep on enjoying yourself.